Begin the current Daf and this Eruvin Daf Samachal. We begin 4 lines down at the top of the Yomid. We continue the discussion from the previous Daf regarding why Rav Idi had said regarding the teaching of Shimon that different Nevi'is and that there are words of prophecy, like how do we understand this differentiation that he's making between Kol Semidas of Emtzeir or B'Seifeir. Shei's Kozbans because of Necheskel, so anytime Tavachayim, Yellow Shutters. Pishan was joining us for today's Daf. Some of the things we're going to discuss in today's Daf are, as we mentioned, the difference if the 2,000 Amos ends in the middle of the city, then you can have one halacha, versus if the 2,000 Amos ends past the city, then the whole city is going to be considered as Daled Amos. The teaching of Rabbi Yosef that measuring the tchum of a city bordering a deep ravine quotes a psak of Rabbi regarding what the halacha is going to be, depending if you're going to have a certain daka or not. Then we have a machlekes regarding one who puts an Eruv in the city. Do they measure the tchum from the border of the city or from the actual Eruv? It's going to be machlekes tanoim in the Mishnah. So we're continuing from the previous stuff where Rav Idi had said in Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg that if it ends in the middle of the city, so you can't go further, it's considered, if let's say this is where his Eruv is, if he would have been here, he would have 2,000 Amos in every direction, and the whole city is like Daled Amos. But if he puts the Eruv 1,000 Amos here, not only do you lose 1,000 Amos in the other direction, but actually, if it ends in the middle of the city, the whole city is actually considered as part of the Tchum itself. Now, whereas if let's say Kol Semidas of B'Seifeir, let's say it spans across in that direction the whole city itself, then you could even go further. Mashlim as a shar or michut, the whole city is not counted as part of your tchum. It's considered like Daled Amos itself. Now, considering this halacha, Rav Idi had said, Divin Nevi'is. It's no logical explanation. What's the difference? You're not having the shvisa in the city itself, which Rabbi says, we brought a Mishnah later on in this daf that makes this exact point of the Ir Gedol and the Ir Ketana, that there's going to be a difference where the Mishnah said, why could they go? Well, of course they could go. If it's within 2,000 Amos, what's the Chiddush? So Rashi should explain what Rabbi means to say is, you could go and like it's not even counted of your Tchum, it's like Daled Amos. Whereas the Mishnah says, the little city, no, they can't go the whole city. Well, why not? Because Kol Semidas Be'em To'ir, it's considered part of the Tchum. So what's Rav Idi saying that it's different Nevi'is saying? That was where we left off in the previous time. That's where we continue 4 lines down the top of the Yom. Rav Idi, that he said that there words of prophecy, what does he do with the Raya of Rava from the coming Mishnah? So it says the Gemara, Anshe Tani. Without Rashi, we wouldn't even know what the Gemara means to say. But what he means to say is that the Mishnah, although Rava had quoted the Mishnah, and we'll see this as we discuss next Mishnah, that one of them is Anshe, one of them is Ein Anshe, meaning Anshe Ir Gedol could go over here Ir Ketana, but Ein Anshe Ir Ketana Halchanis Ir Gedol. But the people of the small city, they can't go the whole big city. That was the version that Rav had said, and that says the Gemara. No, he has a different girsa. His girsa of the coming Mishnah is Anshe Anshe. That actually the Ir Ketana could go the whole Ir Gedol, not just the Ir Gedol and the Ir Ketana. Even the Ir Ketana could go the whole Ir Gedol. Umukim Labanaisin, he explains a whole different halacha. He says it's talking about not where a person is measuring, he's starting his tchum over here and he's measuring to see how far he could go. And could he go the whole Ir Gedol? Somewhere where he places his Eruv in the city. Actually, as the Mishnah itself explains, and we'll see this as we discuss on the bottom of the Amid, the Mishnah says, Ketzad, what's the case? Someone that was in the Ir Gedol, and he put his Eruv in the small city near his city within 2,000 Amos, then Mahalach is cool, he could go the whole small city. Why? Because the Eruv requires from the whole city as a Daled Amos, as if he's having the Shvis over there. And therefore the same thing would be the Ir Ketana to the Ir Gedol. That would be the same thing. If the guy in the Ir Ketana puts his Eruv Tchum in the Ir Gedol, so then yes, of course, then he could go the whole Ir Gedol, because it's like one Daled Amos. Now Rava, however, learned Ein Anshe. He learned to know that the people of the small city cannot go the whole Ir Gedol. And so therefore, obviously, he's talking about where you didn't put the Eruv, because if you put your Eruv over here, he would agree you could walk the whole Ir Gedol, and it's considered the Daled Amos. So therefore, that's the difference is that Rav Idi doesn't have a source for the halacha of going, because he doesn't explain it with, first of all, Ein Anshe. He says Anshe. But why could the people of the small city go? Because they put their tchum over there. They put the Eruv Tchumen over there. Hanois and Eruvin. And then, it's all like Daled Amos. Because Aval Moed did in conscious regarding if you're measuring, let's say you're out of the city, and you're measuring how many thousands of Amos you're going, you get 2,000 Amos. 139, 140, and you're going to 2,000 when you're measuring, lights none. That doesn't say anything in that Mishnah to differentiate between if it ends in the middle of the city or the end of the city to be that Raya to Rabbi Shloimy Levi. And therefore Rabbi Edi says it's different than these because you don't have a proof in the Mishnah because the Mishnah is not talking about measuring and how far is my 2,000 numbers ending in the middle of the city, the end of the city, which that would be the case of the Anshe Ir Gedola that they could go Be'er Gedana and Anshe Ir Gedana cannot go Be'er Gedana because it's not first of all saying Ein Anshe, it says Anshe. It's not talking about Medida. It's not talking about when you measure 2,000 numbers, it's talking about when you put your Eir, as we'll see in the end of this Daf, on the end of this Amid. The Gemara says, V'loi? It's not, what do you mean? It's not true? You don't have a source for even the law of Medida from the next Mishnah? But the next Mishnah continues and says, Ulamaydid, and whoever's measuring from where his Shvisa is or from where his Erev is. Sha'amr that they said that they're going to give him 2,000 amas, Noishno Apayim Amma, they give him 2,000 amas, that is, Shafilasayv Midase Kala B'Ma'ara, that even if the rest of his measurement ends in the cave, he only gets up until there and he doesn't get to the end of the cave. So you see in the Mishnah that talks about when his measurement ends in the middle of the city, that the city is going to be counted as part of his measurements because that's the same thing as the cave. So what's the words of prophecy that Ravid is saying, it's different than V'im here? What do you mean? It's even the other halacha of Medid is also mentioned in the Mishnah. He says, well, yes, but that's only regarding Kol Semidasim Be'emtza. That you're right is alluded to. There was two halachas we mentioned, which we explained the Mishnah and the Brisa. There's Kol Semidasim Be'emtza and Be'sefer. Be'emtza you see from the halacha Be'emtza Ma'ara. That you only get up until where you can walk. But Sefer is Tzichalei. But the end of the city, that Rabbi Shloimy Levi, he had to tell us this halacha that when Kol Semidasim Be'sefer, the whole city is like Daled Amas. Deloit's none. That it doesn't say in the Mishnah, and that's what the words of Nevi is that he's saying. Those are the Nevi'is, and again, according to Rashi, that was a question. According to Traces, Rabbi Shlach. But the point is that didn't say clearly in the Mishnah. Now the Gemara concludes and says regarding this machlekes that we mentioned. So Amar Rav Nachman, he says Mandatani Inchi, the one who has the girsa of Ravidi, which was that Anshe the Ir Katana that they could go Be'er Gedola, Loy Mishtabish, it's not a mistake. Umandatani Ein Anshe, according to Rav's version, that it's saying that the people of a small city cannot go the whole Ir Gedola. Loy Mishtabish, they're also not mistaken. This is Gemara explains. Mandatani Anshe, the one whose girsa in the Mishnah is that the people of the small city could go the whole big city. Loy Mishtabish, there's no error because the Mukim lo b'naisin, as we said, that like Ravidi, they're going to explain the Mishnah where, and actually the Mishnah itself explicitly says Ketzad, and the Ketzad is by putting your Erev. So, of course, if the people of the small city put their Erev in the big city, of course you can go the whole Ir Gedola as Daled Amas, because that's where your Shvisa is, through your Erev. According to the one who has the Girsa that the people of the small city cannot go the whole Ir Gedola like Daled Amas, they're not mistaken, because the Mukim lo b'maydin. He talks about where it's regarding where you're measuring. Meaning, what does maydin mean? To say, this is where your Shvisa is in the small city. And you come, and it ends 2,000, because it's a big city, your 2,000 ends in the middle. And therefore, according to that interpretation of Rava, you have to actually say there's words missing in the next Mishnah. And this is what the Mishnah says. Anshe Ir Gedola, the people of the big city, when they're coming out of their city to go to the small city, which is absorbed in their 2,000 amas. So for example, let's say it's 1,000 amas away from the city, and the city itself, the small city, is itself 1,000 amas. So then, Mahalchan is called Katana, like in this picture. They can go the whole small city, like Daled Amas, and then they can go another 1,000 over here on the other side. That's from the big city to the small city. Now, Ve'ein Anshe Ir Katana, Mahalchan is called Gedela. But the people of the small city cannot go the whole large city, which is, it's 1,000 amas away from the city, like we said. And the big city itself is 2,000 amas. So since the whole big city is not spanned in their 2,000 amas, so it's considered part of the tchum, and they can only go into 1,000 of it. And the Mishnah that continues saying when it says Ketzad, that's actually not going on this halacha of Medida. That's the Chesur Mefsra. That's talking about by when you put the Erev. That's what the Gemara explains you have to add on to the Mishnah. But when did we say this halacha that the people of the small city cannot go the whole big city like Daled Amas? That's b'maydid. That's when the guy is measuring his 2,000 amas. But if someone that was in the big city, and he puts his Erev in the small city, or, and this is the Chiddush part, which we're saying the Chesur Mechser, if he was in the small city, and he put his Erev into the big city, then he could go in the whole city as Daled Amas, and then he can go another 2,000 amas beyond, and therefore both interpretations are meyushiv in the next Mishnah. It's just Anshe and how could Anshe and Ein Anshe be Meyushav? Isn't that exact opposites? No. Depends what case you're going to describe it. One's going to describe it by the measuring of your trum, and then one other one's going to measure it regarding when you put your Eruv into that city. Now, Amar Rav Yosef. So the Gemara now brings something similar regarding a differentiation from Rav Yosef. Amar Rami Bar Abba Amar Rav Huna says, Ir sheyesheves al svas hanachal. If you have a city by the edge of a ravine, by a deep stream, so it depends. Im yesh now daka, if in front of the city there's essentially a machitza, and here it's different, and the girsa has to change. It's not arba, but it's actually arba. That's 4 amas high around the entire perimeter of the city by the edge of the river. Then you will measure the city for its tchum by the edge of the ravine, which that's where the city ends, like all other cities, which you measure where it ends. But if not, if you don't have this daka, if you don't have this wall around the city, since it's scary because you're right there by the edge of a river, deep ravine, so it's not a settlement that's permanent. So essentially they're like yeshvit srifin. And then we're not going to measure for every single person. Rather, it's going to be from the entry of his house. Just like we said, you have a city full of srifin of huts, where even though you have hundreds and thousands of them, you're going to measure everyone from their own house. It's not like a city because it's impermanent. Here also it's impermanent because it's very scary to go ahead and live in such a city unless you have the daka. Now, Amalei Abai said to Rabbi Yosef, he says, Daka arba amas amrit lo nala. You told us this halacha requires a daka b'chitzam of dalad amas in the height. So now we're going to ask from you, why is it different than all other dakas in general? The arba, we mentioned this previously, that the Gemara said on Daf Samach Amad Aleph, in the previous Daf, that when we're talking about, let's say, a merpeset, we had the porch that had a ladder in front of it, which we said that you have to have, if you want to separate the people on the porch, on the second story from the first story, you're going to have to make a daka there on the bottom where the ladder starts. And how big does that daka have to be? Dalit Tfachim. Why over here does it have to be Dalit Amas? So on that, Amalei said to no, they have different functions. There by the porch, it's not like there's as if a fear about falling down. It's just as a hecker. It's just as a sign, as a reminder that we're separate. That's enough Dalit Tfachim. Here, it's a scary to have a city right there by the edge of the river, and therefore that requires a height of Dalit Amas to go ahead and make a separation so that we could consider this as a city and not as Yeshvit Tzvi. Now, Amr Rabbi says, where do I get this idea that there's a difference in general regarding a city, if it's going to be a daka or not, to say if it's going to function as a city or not? It's not like learn a price. This is an interesting case that the Gemara brings. Hitter Rebbe permitted shiur b'nei geder yardin l'chamsin. He permitted, it was a city, there was Geder and Chamsin were 2 cities on the slope of a mountain. Geder was on the top, and Chamsin was on the bottom, like some Rashis have the picture. Now, since both of them are on the slope, they both need a daka b'shipulan on the slope. Right? It's the same idea when you're by a ravine, by a river, which is scary. Here also, it's on the slope. So the assumption of the Gemara is that both of them were within 2,000 amas of the other one. And what did Rebbe let? He let the b'nei geder to be yard l'chamtzin. He let them, people geder, go down to chamtzin. But v'im b'nei chamtzin only geder. He didn't let the people of chamtzin go up together. So this is Rabbi Yosef's proof. He says, wait a second, my time, what's the reason? Lav mishum, isn't it because the Hani, the people of Geder, of Vidaka, they had this mechitza, they had this wall. So therefore, all those who live in Geder, when they want to go to Chamsin, where do they start counting from? From the wall of Geder towards Chamsin, like all other cities. Now, the whole Chamsin is within the Tchum of Geder. So therefore, everyone in Geder could go to Chamsin. But the Hani, the people of Chamsin, lo yav a daka, they didn't do a daka where? On the bottom meaning they're on the slope of the mountain too. So therefore, Chamsin was not considered as a city. So therefore, everyone had to measure from the opening of their house. Now, whereas regarding those on the top of Chamsin, they were within 2,000 amas of Geder, and they're all in the Tchum of Geder. They could go into the whole Geder, but what we're saying is, those who are in the bottom of Chamsin, they can't go up because they have to measure from their house. And they're not going to get to the whole Geder, and therefore that was Rabbi Yosef's raya to this halacha that you see that if you make a Geder or not, if you, not, no pun intended with Geder, if you make a wall or not, that daka, so that's going to be, that it'll be as a city, and therefore everyone in that Geder could measure from here till here, which is including 2,000 amas, but people over here, they can't go the whole Geder because he can't measure from the end of the city, the walls, he has to measure from his house, because they didn't have, they're still on the slope of the mountain, and they didn't do daka. But says the Gemara, the Gemara brings three other interpretations of this halacha. Kiyasar Rav Dimi Amar, he says no, it's no proof, because actually tatruge mitatargege lahu b'nei Geder b'nei Chamsa. The people of Geder, they would hit and they would hurt or kill the people of Chamsa. Now, umay hitter. So what does it mean? Rebbe permitted? It means hiskin. He instituted that people of Geder cannot go down. That they could go, that the people of Chamsa cannot come together because the people in Geder are going to hurt them and kill them. So why does it have to do with Shabbos? It should be any day of the week. But since on Shabbos that the people will get drunk, so therefore they didn't let the people of Chamsa come together because then they would terrorize the people of Chamsa. Says Gemara, wait a second. Then Ki Azli, when the people of Geder go lahasam over there to Chamsa, so now so then those are going to hurt them. So then why do you let the people of Geder go to Chamsa? Says the Gemara, no. A dog not in its town, it doesn't bark for 7 years. So therefore, when the people of Geder come to Chamsa, the people of Geder would behave because they're not on their own turf. So well, wait a second, then Hashanami, then here also. But shouldn't we be concerned that the people of Chamsa are going to then terrorize the people of Geder because they're not on their own turf, so then they're going to go ahead and injure them. So no, the people of Geder would not be so subservient to the people of Chamsa that even if the people of Geder are not on their own turf, but the Bnei Chamsa are not going to be so brave as to go ahead and terrorize the people of Geder. So that was the second interpretation for this halacha. When the people of Geder could go to Chamsa, the people of Chamsa cannot go to Geder. It's not really halacha regarding Shabbos. It's really all week, but Shabbos was when they got drunk. A third opinion of Saframi says, no, another reason why it's not a riot to Rabbi Yosef. Says, interesting. This Chamsa was a city made like a bow, which if you recall in the beginning of the parak we spoke about this case of the bow, that the two ends of the city were more than 4,000 amas apart from each other. We said in such a case when they're not overlapping the tchum over here by the yeser, by the bowstring, you actually have to measure from the keshes, from the bow, every single person when he leaves his house. Which the bow string, the yeser was towards the city of Geder. So therefore the people of Geder could go to Chamsin because they measure from the wall of the city, and the whole Chamsin was within 2,000 amas of the tchum. But the people of Chamsin that are in the keshes, they have to measure from the keshes. Their tchum ends over here in the beginning of Geder. So they can't go in any further in. So that's why the Geder people go to Chamsin, but the people of Chamsin cannot go in to the whole Geder. Which Chase discusses this interpretation of Rashi, which is very similar seemingly to the next interpretation the Gemara brings, which Rav Tima Bar China Amar, he says, Anshi Ir Gedoyla, V'anshi Ir Ketanavi. What it was is that Geder was a big city, and when they would go to Chamsin, so then so when the people of Chamsin would come into Geder, it would end in the middle of the city. Now, if you recall, we said that if it ends in the middle of the city, so then you can't go. It's called Midas of Seir. But Chamsin was a small city, so when the people of Geder would go to Chamsin, that would be called Midas Seir. And that's what Rabbi was saying. The people of Geder could go down to Chamsin, meaning that the whole city should be like Dalet Amas, and then they could supplement the rest beyond that. But Geder, that is for Bnei Chamsin, is going to be included as part of the Tchum because it ends be'emtza here. So therefore, that was the fourth interpretation. The Gemara just brings Rav Kahana Masni Hachi. He taught exactly like we just said explicitly. That each man Amr said what his opinion was. But Rav Yomi Masni Hachi, he taught that no, it didn't say clearly who said what. Rav Safra, Rav Dim Bachina. One said it was a city made like a bow. One said one was a big city, one was a small city. Again, he just doesn't, according to that version, it's not verified who says what. But again, those are the other interpretations, and therefore wouldn't be a raya to Rabbi Yosef who wants to say that the halacha of Rabbi, why the people of Geder were able to go to Chamsa, people of Chamsa were able to go to Geder, is because they made a daka and they didn't make a daka. It's not a raya because we have three other interpretations of what exactly that case was. Now, Mishnah, which was what we had been referencing on the top of the Amid, regarding this case Anshe Ir Gedela. We said the people of a big city. So Mahalchan is called Ir Gedela. They could walk the whole small city. Again, what that means to say, besides of the measurement of their tchum, it's not going to be counted as a tchum. It's going to be like Daled Amas. And the Anshe Ir Gedela, Mahalchan is called Ir Gedela. And the people of the small city, they could also go the whole big city. Which this is the more kalat. This is the more interpretation that works well with the girsa, because the word ketzad, according to Rava, who says einan, you have to say a chisur mechsher, as you recall from Tab Amid. According to Rav Dimi, so it makes sense. We're talking about a different halacha. We're not talking about medida. We're talking about noisin. You put your erev. That's what ketzad. That's why Anshe Ir Gedela could go the whole erev because we're talking about where he put his erev in there. That's what the Mishnah says. Ketzad. Mishai Bir Gedela, if someone was in the big city, but not as Bir Gedela, put his erev in the small city, or Bir Gedela was in the small city, but not as Bir Gedela put his erev in the big city. So then either one, wherever you put your erev, Mahalchan has kula, so you could go the whole city like Daled Amas, because that's where Shvis is. The Shvis is where you put your food. And Bechutzla, Pai Mama, and then beyond it, you go to 2,000 Amas. That's the opinion of the Tani Kam. But Rabbi Kiva, I mean, he disagrees. He says, no, Ein La'el B'Makom Eruva Pai Mama, you only get from your erev 2,000 Amas. You don't get the whole city. If you put your erev in the big city, according to Rabbi Kiva, it might end in the middle of the city because you only get from where your erev is. When you're in a certain town, you're actually there by yourself, then you get the whole city. But according to Rabbi Kiva, if you put your food there, you only get B'Makom Eruvai 2,000 Amas. Now, unlike Rabbi Kiva says to them, he tries to make a raya. He says, don't you agree to me? But if someone puts his erev in the cave, that you only get from where your erev is 2,000 Amas, and you don't get more than that. So Amalei the Chacham said to them, yes, Amos said, but when do we say this? This man she'im but diurin, when there is no dwellers in that cave. But if there are dwellers, so then then the whole thing is considered like Daled Amas, and you go beyond that 2,000 Amas, and therefore don't argue with us, or you're trying to disprove us that we hold that when you put your erev in the town that you shouldn't get like the whole town Daled Amas. Not true, because this they try to bring me from a cave. We only agree to you when there's no diurin. But when they are diurin, just like a town, and you put your erev, then you do get the whole thing like Daled Amas. Which on that Mishnah says, Nimtza comes out that Kal Teicha, that the inside of the cave is more lenient because of the dwellers, Mial Gaba, from on top of the cave, which has no dwellers. Because if you would put your erev on top of the cave, so then you're right, you'd only get 2,000 Amas from wherever your erev is. Whereas when you put it inside, you get the whole thing. Now, however, and that says the Mishnah, although the Chacham disagreed with Rabbi Kiva regarding when you put your erev in the city to say that the whole city is going to be like Daled Amas, they do agree, however, when you didn't put your erev, but rather you're coming from some other city or from wherever you had your shvisa, that regarding if you're measuring that your measurement of 2,000 Amas of medium-sized steps, that then when you give you 2,000 Amas, only 2,000 Amas, that even if your end of your measurement mamish ends in the middle of a cave, even if the cave has dwellers, you cannot go in more than 2,000 Amas, again, when you're coming in over there. If your shvisa was over here, then we give you the whole thing. You put your erev, you get the whole thing. But Acham agree that if you put your erev somewhere else and you're walking, and it ends right here in the middle of the cave, that you can't go anymore. That's where your 2,000 Amas ends. That's like the halacha because here, that all you get. That's where you brought the raya from. Everyone agrees that that's a raya from our Mishnah. That's where it ends. The only thing he said Divin Nevi'ah was when it ends Ben Sefer that he says you don't see in our Mishnah because he had the gears of Anshe, which we mentioned on the top of the sum. Continue to days where the Gemara brings the following machlekes Amiram. I'm going to read the Mishmol. It's a little bit complicated, but it's like this: Shabbos be'ir charev. If someone spent Shabbos, meaning he made his shvisa in a desolate city, meaning there's no dwellers over there, but as Rashi points out, there are walls around the city, but there's no dwellers. So says Rabbi Mishmul, the Rabbanan contra Rabbanan, Mahalach es kula. You could walk the whole city like Daled Amas, because you were shavas in Avar Mechitzis, in the airspace of something that's enclosed with walls, and then Mechutz L'Pai Mama, and then beyond you get 2,000 Amas. Now, Rashi points out, the truth is, the same thing would be even according to Rabbi Kiva. Because Rabbi Kiva also agrees that when you're shavas in a certain place, you get the whole place like Daled Amas. So why did he say it specifically in Rabbanan? It's because of the next case that he wants to say, regarding Hinuyach Erubai, not when you were shavas over there yourself, but rather you placed your erev over there, that then he wants to differentiate between if it's a ir chareva or ir miyushavas, depends if there's dwellers or not. According to Rabbi Kiva, even if it's miyushavas, you would not get the whole town like Dalet Amas. You would only have from wherever your Erev is 2,000 Amas, like he said in the Mishnah. So that's why he's saying Rabban. But the first halacha is true even according to Rabbi Kiva. Now, the next case is oh, but let's say you put your Erev, not that you were Shabbos, you put your Erev in a desolate city. Then says Shmuel, then you only get from wherever the exact spot of your Erev is 2,000 Amas, as Rashi explains. When the Rabbanan say that the whole city is going to be like Dalet Amas, that is being Miyusheves. That's when it's a settled town, as actually the Mishnah explicitly says, as we actually ask on the next Manda Amar. Because the Mishnah says, Eimasai. The Chacham said, oh, when is it like Rabbi Kiva? Bisman Shema Diyurin, when there's no dwellers in the cave. Then we'll say you only get Mimakam Erubi 2,000 Amas. But we see by Chareva that they do agree that all you get is 2,000 Amas. They only disagree when there were dwellers. When there's no dwellers, they agree. That's the opinion of Shmuel. However, Elazar, he disagrees. He says, no. Echad Shabbos, he says, whether if a person spent Shabbos over there, or whether even if he placed the Erev, even though we're talking about Ircha that there's no dwellers in the town, you can go the whole city like Dalet Amas, but you can go beyond the 2,000 Amas. On that interpretation of Rabbi Elazar, they're going to ask from our Mishnah, as we pointed out before when we explained the first Madam of Shmuel. The Mishnah said, I'm going to Kiva, who says, whenever you put an Erev in another city, you don't get the whole city like Dalet Amas. It's only in your Shabbos over there. You put your Erev, you only get from the place where your bread is. Chacham say no. If you put your Erev over there, it's like you're there for Shabbos, you get the whole city like Dalet Amas. So in the Mishnah, the Kiva said to Chacham, don't you agree to me? But niceness is when you put your Erev in the cave, you only get from the place of the Erev 2,000 Amas. So you see that you don't get the whole cave, you only get where you put the bread, so you don't disagree with me regarding the city. Amalei said to him, I know, you're right. But Amos said, when did we say this? Bisman Shema Diyurin, when there's no dwellers. But when there's dwellers in the cave, of course you would get the whole cave. And so too by a city. Now, but one thing is you see that they agree, but if the cave, and so too a city, has no dwellers, then they would agree to him that what? You can't go the whole cave. That's not like Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar just said that according to Rabbanan, that even by Ircha, which is essentially what a cave is, it's a big enclosed area that's desolate, that you're going to get Kula Kedalet Amas. You see from the Mishnah clearly that Chacham agree when it's Chareva that you don't get like Dalet Amas. So and that says the Gemara, no, Mayim B'Diyurin. What though the Chacham mean that they agree by the cave that you don't get Kula Kedalet Amas when there's no Diyurin? Doesn't mean that there's no dwellers. It means in a ru'uy ladira. It's not fit for dwelling, meaning, as Rashi explains, the walls fell down. There's no mechitzas, so therefore you cannot treat it like Dalet Amas. But if it just didn't have dwellers, it's not true. The Chacham would agree to their opinion, not like Rabbi Kiva, that you would be able to treat the whole cave and the whole city like Dalet Amas. The Gemara says, Tashma, the Gemara tries to bring another eye. Bryce says, Shabbos Be'ir. If someone spent Shabbos in the city, even though it's big as Antuchi, which is a huge metropolis, a huge city, or B'ma'ar, or a cave, even though it's as big as the cave of Tzidkiyahu, the king of Judea, which was very big, because that's the cave that Tzidkiyahu left at nighttime from Yerushalayim to run away from the Kazim, as the Pasuk says in Yomei, but Tibaka Ir, which obviously a very big cave because it was very, very far. Still, either way, even though it's very big, Mahalach as Kula, you can go the whole city and the whole cave as Dalet Amas, because it's an enclosed area. And beyond it is where you get your 2,000 Amas. One thing says the Gemara like this. Kutani Ir Dumi Demar. The Brisa has two cases. And generally when we have two cases, they're comparable. You have a city and you have a cave. So Mam Ma'orach Hareva, just like a cave has no dwellers, so too the city has no dwellers, because Rashi says, obviously the cave is desolate from dwellers, and not, meaning when we're saying Hareva, we're talking about obviously it's Hareva from dwellers and not from a wall, because if it was regarding a wall, then the Brisa would not have said Mahalach is Kula, because then you're not Shabbos Ba'av Mechitzas. So obviously we see that we're talking about that there is a wall, and when we're saying it's Chareva, like a cave, is that it's Chareva from Diyurim. And still, what do you see? The Shavas in, what's the Brisa saying? If it specifically said Shavas, if you were Shavas in the ear or in the cave, that then yes, then you're going to treat all as Dalet Amas. Aval him niyaf, loy. But if you placed your Erev in the cave or in that city that's Gadol Kantuchia, that has no dwellers, right? It's Chareva. How do you know it's Chareva? Because it's compared to the Ma'ara. The Ma'ara is Chareva. So Mani, who's the time of the Brisa that is telling us that it's not going to apply if you place the Eruv over there. If you were Shavas, it's going to be like Dalet Amos. But if you place the Eruv, it's not going to be like Dalet Amos. Right? Because if it was Haniach, say bigger Chiddush, why say Shavas? Say even Haniach Eruv. Elim Rabbi Kiva, everything is like Rabbi Kiva, where he doesn't hold when you put an Eruv in a place that you could go the whole thing like Dalet Amos. So then why would you say a city similar to a cave that we have to make the inference as Tumar Ir Chareva? Ma Ir Chareva. Why would you say it's not like Dalet Amos when it's desolate? Afil Yeshiva Nami. What do you mean? Even if it's settled. So Rabbi Kiva always holds that when you place an Eruv in a place, even a settled city with people, you don't get the whole thing like Dalet Amos. You have to measure where it is. Now Rashi points out, and you cannot say that the reason why we said an Ir Chareva is because not for the inferred case of Hiniach, of when you put the Eruv, but because of Shabbos, which is the case of Brisa, when you're starting Shabbos over there, to tell you that even though the city is desolate from dwellers, it's a ghost town, but still if you were Shabbos over there, you could go the whole city like Dalet Amos, and that would be Chiddush and Remeir. Remeir is usually the more machmer over here, and still he would treat the whole city like Dalet Amos. Says Rashi, no. Why would you say Ir? You wouldn't have to say city. Even a mound, or a cleft, or a pile of grain, that if it's surrounded, we said in the first paragraph of Tezvav and Aleph, you could go the whole area. So why would you have to say a city? It's obviously not Rabbi Kiva, because if it's regarding Shabbos, and that would be the Chiddush, then you don't have to say a city, B'chlal. Obviously the Chiddush is not in the case of Shabbos, but in Hiniach. So regarding Hiniach, then why do you have to say Ir Dumi de Ma'ar to say it's Chareva, according to Rabbi Kiva, even if it was Yeshiva, even if it was a settlement, you still wouldn't get the whole city of Dalet Amos. And this is the proof of the Gemara. It's Elav Rabbanan. Obviously, that who's the town of this Brisa? Is the Rabbanan. Oh, what do you see from that? By Chareva they agree. Because obviously, why are we saying the Ir Dumi de Ma'ara? Is to tell you that it's desolate because of the inferred case that it didn't say Hiniach. And that's what we're coming to tell you. But time in the Shabbos, the reason why you get the whole city, even though it's desolate, is because you spend Shabbos over there. That's where it's going to be like Dalet Amos. But if you put the Eruvin over there, then it wouldn't be like Dalet Amos. So you see, not like Rabbi Lazi, you see like in the Mishmul, that Hiniach Eruvai Be'ir Chareva, you don't get it like Dalet Amos. Rashi says no. Don't say like you were, you compare the two cases, but don't say that the city is similar to a cave, that to tell me that the city is Chareva, but tell me that the cave is similar to the city, which is the exact opposite. Ma'ir Yeshiva, just like the city is settled, of Ma'ar Yeshiva. So the cave is settled, and it's coming to tell us that even so, even though it's settled, only if you were Shavas, doesn't be Dalet Amos. But if you put the Eruv over there, it wouldn't be, because actually Rabbi Kiva, it's actually Rabbi Kiva. The Amad that he says, that you only give him when you put the Eruv 2,000 Amas, but the Chiddush is Shavas Maida. But when you started Shabbos over there, even though there's no women dwellers, you'll get the whole thing like Dalet Amos. So there's no difficulty on Rabbi Lazar, because it's actually not Rabban, it's Rabbi Kiva, and the Chiddush is in Shabbos, not in Hiniach. But says Gemara, but what do you mean? This was, the whole inference was starting. We were saying that Ir Dumi de Ma'ara. Now, how do we know that the Ma'ara is desolate? No. Okay, generally Ma'ara is desolate. But what was the case the Brisa compared it to? It's as big as Ma'ar Tzidkiyo. Now Rashi makes two interpretations. Either there was no dwellers over there because it was the kings, so no one was able to be over there, so obviously there were no dwellers. Or it means because right now it's desolate. But one thing we see that it was desolate. So how could you say that, no, it's not Ir Dumi de Ma'ara, it's Ma'ar Dumi de Ir, that just like the Ir is settled so to the Ma'ara, but it's not true. Ma'ar Tzidkiyo does not have dwellers. So no, Ma'ar Tzidkiyo, V'loi Ma'ar Tzidkiyo. Yeah, we were comparing it to the cave of Tzidkiyo, but not totally. Kamar Tzidkiyo, when we're saying it's like Ma'ar Tzidkiyo, meant just to tell us that it's Kedayla, even though it's very big. But it's not totally Kamar Tzidkiyo, because the Ilah Hashem Charib, whereas over there was desolate. Well, but here it's settled, and again, there was not difficult on Rabbi Lazar, because it was going like Rabbi Kiva, not like Rabban. Now the Gemara brings a story related to this machlekes in our Mishnah, that Bar Yehuda, Ashkechinu lebnei Mavrachta. He encountered people in Mavrachta, the Komoisvi Iruvayu, they put their Eruv, Bebei Kanishta de Bei Agoiver. In the shul in Bei Agoiver, which was a big Beis HaKnesses, which all of that shul was within the 2,000 amas of the Tchum of Mavrachta. Now, the people who put the Eruvin Tchumen in the shul, they weren't concerned to put it so deep into the end of the shul because they held like a Rabbanan. Rabbanan in our Mishnah said once you put an Eruv in an area surrounded with walls, let's say a city, so then the whole area is like Dalet Amos, and you only start your Dalet Amos not from where the Eruv was placed, but from beyond the walls of that place. So, but he said to them, put push in, go deeper, put the Eruv at the end of the shul so that you get more space. Then you'll be able to go further from the place of the Eruv where you want to measure from. Rabbi said to Palga, you're coming to disagree on the Chachamim? The Eruvin and the laws of Eruvin, less the Chash Lahad Rabbi Kiva, no one's concerned with the opinion of Rabbi Kiva because we hold Halacha Gedivra Mekel, the Eruv, and therefore it has nothing to do with you put the bread in the shul, the whole shul anyways is going to be like Daled Amas, and therefore we don't have to put it deeper, it doesn't make a difference where in the shul you're actually going to put it. Hanilach Ketz Ma'abrin, shall return to the fifth paragraph of Masechtas Eruvin, Parak Ketz Ma'abrin, which spoke about the laws of Tchumen. On that we begin the sixth parak, which we'll just do the Mishnah, and we'll discuss the Mishnah on the next stuff, what's called Parak Hadar, which is the sixth parak, which speaks about the laws of Eruvin Chatzeres. So the Mishnah begins. Hadar ma'akim machatzav. Someone dwells with a non-Jew in the courtyard. Or someone who does not agree with the Erev. Again, just to briefly explain, in Talmudic times, everyone had their houses open up to Chatzeres, and the courtyards, and there was a common courtyard, and then the courtyards opened up to Mavais, to alleys, and the alleys opened up to the Shus Rabbim, and that's what made up the town. So there's a halacha known as Eruvin Chatzeres, which is generally what we use, let's say, development. Essentially, that's what a development is. They have the house open up to their courtyard. That's considered the chatzah. So what we're discussing over here, so in regular Yiddish development, so good, that's it, you make the Eruvin Chatzeres as we know it. Here we have another variable here. Let's say someone's living with a non-Jew in the courtyard. Someone who does not admit to the laws of Erev, like Rashi explains, it refers to a kuti, as we already explained this in the Falam Alpha Mabez. So then Hariza Isra. So actually that kuti, that kufin, or that non-Jew, makes it forbidden for the Jew to carry from his house to the courtyard until he rents the rights of the non-Jew in the courtyard. So until he does that, the non-Jew makes it forbidden for the Jew to carry in the courtyard. He says, it's not going to be forbidden until there's two Jews living in two different houses in that development, and then the Jews make it forbidden one on the other. So then the Jews have to make an Erev amongst themselves. Then the non-Jew makes it forbidden on the two Jews. But when there's only one Jew, then it's not going to be forbidden. I think I want to explain what's the reason for that. Why would it be forbidden only with two Jews, but actually permitted with one Jew? That's regarding Akum and Kuti. Now, Amr Gamliel says, as Rashi explains, Gamliel holds that Tzedukim were a group of people called the Sadducees, that they didn't have halacha like non-Jews, because they weren't non-Jews, actually Jews who were just heretics, that they just said we don't believe in the oral law. But they're also not similar to Kutim, which they were not really full-fledged Gerim, they were only Gerim because of lions that were attacking them. So the Tzeduki, he's really a Jew, but he became a heretic, because he doesn't agree to Torah Shabbat Peh. Now, since he's a Jew, he could do what's called bittul. He could nullify his domain without renting his property. A non-Jew can't do bittul. What happens is everyone has to do Eruvin Chatzeres. Let's say one Jew forgot to. Oy vey, the guy didn't join the Erev. Now no one could carry into the common area in the whole bungalow common. So what he could do is he could do bittul. He could nullify his rights. And then, he has no rights, and now we're all considered one because everyone else made an Erev. Now, additionally, as some Rashis add on the words, Gamliel also holds whoever's mavatal his rishus, at least as according to the first version the Mishnah brings, once the people of the Mavi take his rights that he gave up, he can't retract anymore. So that's what Gamliel is saying over here in the first version. There was a story of one Sadducee. He lived with us in the same alleyway in Yerushalayim. Now, he was mavatal to us, as the Girsa is supposed to be in Rashi, his rishus. So he gave us the rights away, although he didn't join the Erev. He's not a believer, this and that, but you guys want to do what you want to do, you guys are Orthodox, he gives up his rights to him. Now, Ramil says that our father told us, quickly, take out your vessels to the alleyway and be machzik, get the rights away in the Mavai right the moment Shabbos starts, so that he can't back out anymore, because he already took the rights away. Now, that's one version. Because Achla Yotzi, until he doesn't go out and take out his Kalim first, and now he's going to be backing out, because he's going to be, how can you take out Kalim to the Mavai, to the Chatzah? You have no rights in the courtyard. So until he does that, he's going to make it forbidden on you. But obviously you see that Gamliel held that the Tzedukim were not like non-Jews. Because if he was like a non-Jew, then they would have actually have to rent from him the rights away. And how could he back out? Even if he would go and take his Kalim out to the Mavai, he wouldn't make it forbidden because he's holding the money. So obviously the tzeduk is not like akum, and therefore he could do like you saw him b'mavatlas rishos. But quickly chap around. Our father told us go quickly take out the moment Shabbos starts, so that he can't back out anymore because we really took his rights away. But however, Yehuda he said in a different version, which tells us one difference. He says that in Lil said his father said, "Maru va'asu tzarchechem b'mavah." Quickly go do whatever you needed to do on Shabbos in the mavai or before Shabbos, because in Shabbos the bittul is not going to help you anymore. Why? Because he might go out and take out his stuff, and then he's going to make it forbidden on you. Because as Rashi explains, Rabbi Yehuda holds that even if the people in the mavai already took the rights away originally, he could still be chayzer, and therefore he would still make it forbidden. So it says the Tata said quickly, even though he gave you quickly do what you have to do, because the moment he comes, he's going to undo it, and therefore you didn't have your rights away in the chutzner, in the mavai. Something to discuss in today's daf, in Eruvin Daf Samach Aleph, was that we had that according to Rav Idi, he said that the words of Rabbi Shloimy Levi are divin neviyasein. So what's with the coming Mishnah? The coming Mishnah said the two halachas of Rabbi Shloimy Levi. So on that he says no, it's not by measuring. It's rather by he puts his eruv into that larger city. And then Anshe Tanan, he actually says the Anshe Ir Gedolah and the Anshe Gedolah could carry in either city because it's one where you put your eruv in the Ir Gedolah. So of course you can go to the big city. But according to the Rabbi who says Ein Anshe Gedolah, he has to say Tuma by Moedin, where you're starting from the small city and then you're going 2,000 feet step into the big city. So then you don't get the whole Ir Gedolah because it ends in the middle of the city. That's how Rava understands. So he would say it's not different in the base because you see in the Mishnah. He says different in the base because you don't see in the Mishnah because he's not talking about the case of Dida. It's my case of Leis Eruvin. Now, although either way, the next part of the next Mishnah says explicitly the halacha of kala be'emtza ir, which was the same as the kala be'emtza ma'ara, which we said explicitly that the Chacham agreed that you don't get the whole ma'ara. Yes, but it doesn't tell us the halacha of soifa ir. It doesn't say when it spans the whole thing that it's included like Dalet Ames. That it didn't say, and that's where it said was different Nevi'as. Rav Idi said of Rabbi Shloimy Levi. Then we said that there's a city by the Sfas HaNachal, by the end of a ravine. So then you're going to measure from every person's house, not the end of the city, unless if there's a daka. If there's a daka that's 4 amas high, then it's going to be like a regular city that you measure from the city wall. Now, the reason why it has to be 4 amas high is because the Be'isa Tashmish, because it's scary by the end of a river. But by the previous halacha, by the people of Marpesed, there by the bottom of the ladder, they only had to have a height of 4 tefachim because it wasn't any scary thing. It was just to make a hecker that they're separate. Now, Rav Yosef tried to bring a raya from a brisa that Rebbe permitted that the people of Geder could go to Chamsin, but people of Chamsin cannot go together. Why? Rav Yosef wanted to bring a raya because he said the people of Geder made a daka, so they can measure from the end of their city on the end of where they are. So everyone in Geder measures from the end of their city, and Chamsin is within that tchum. But Chamsin people did not make a Geder, they didn't make a daka by the end of their city. So then everyone has to measure from the opening of their house. So not everyone of Chamsin could go through the whole Geder because everyone measures from the opening of his house, and therefore that was one interpretation. But then they can remember 3 other interpretations. The people of Geder, they would hurt the people of Chamsin. So therefore, but that was only becoming in their own place. So he didn't let the people of Chamsin come together simply because they're going to get injured, and that was only on Shabbos when the people of Geder were drunk. But Geder could go to Chamsin because, they're not going to hurt them there because they're not in their own turf. But the people of Chamsin are not going to injure the people of Geder because that much they're not. They're still intimidated a little bit. Or a third interpretation was Chamsin was made of like a keshes, and the 2 ends of the keshes of the bow was more than 4,000 amas. So Geder could go because Chamsin was included, but Chamsin can't go through the whole Geder, which is really very similar to the next interpretation of Geder being Ir Gedolah and Chamsin was Ir Ketana. So Chamsin Ir Ketana, when you're measuring the tchum, ends in the middle of Geder, so you couldn't go the whole Geder. But Chamsin is small, and Geder could go. The whole Chamsin, therefore Geder could go through the whole Chamsin as Dal Ramas, and Chamsin cannot go through the whole Geder as Dal Ramas. Then we went to the next mission. We said if someone puts his eruv, a nice eruv, then the whole city is like Dal Ramas. But according to Rekiva, no. According to Rekiva, the whole city is not Dal Ramas. You put your eruv, you only get from the place of the bread itself. You don't necessarily get the whole city. Now, but if you're measuring, let's say from out of the city, and then it ends somewhere in the middle of the city, everyone would agree, like in the case of Ma'ara, that you would only get exactly where your foot stops in the middle of the city. The only machlek is in the opinion of the Rabbanan. If you put your eruv in the Ir Chareva, so is the whole city like Dalet Amas or not? So as Rashi explained, if you're shavas in the Echareva, everyone, even according to the keyboard hold, you go the whole city, because even a cleft of a rock, even a kama, the standing grain, a corn maze, if you're surrounded, even the Rebbe Kiva, everyone agrees you get the whole thing Dalet Amos. The whole machlekes was in Rabbanan regarding if you're nice hanich Eruvin, you put your Eruvin in the Echareva. It's like Dalet Amos. So the Gemara had two questions on Rebbe Lazar, who says that you're not going to get that. He says that you are going to get it's even by Echareva as Dalet Amos. So there's no right from the Mishnah Rabban agree by the Echareva like a Ma'ara. We say, wait a second, by Ma'ara, they said we agree if you put your Erev in the Ma'ara, you're not going to get the whole thing like Dalet Amos. Wait, isn't that the same case as in Necha Ruvai B'Ma'ara, which is Chareva, which you see that's not like Dalet Amos? So that's the Gemara says no, because over there it's Charv Mechitza Seha. There was no walls of the Ir Chareva or from the Ma'ara. But if they had walls, then yeah, it's not just that they imba diurin. It's in a ruler because there was no walls. But if it had walls, then yeah, you would be able to, if you put your Eruv in the Ma'ara, then Rabbi Lazar would say the Chum would agree that no, not like Rabbi Kiva, that you would get the whole cave and city as Dalet Amos. The second raya, not like it was from a Brisa, which the Gemara said is not a raya, where we're comparing a city to a cave, where it's Chareva, just like a Ma'ara. And you see that you could go the whole thing only when you were Shavas, and not by Heniach, which is a case of Chareva, not like Rabbi Lazar. So the Gemara says no, it's the contrary. We're comparing Ma'ara to Ir, which is actually a Yeshiva, which actually settled. Because it's going like Rabbi Kiva, and just come and tell us that he agrees that even though it's Chareva, still, but if you're Shabbos over there, you get the whole thing like Dalet Amos. And the Chiddush is that even though it's Yeshiva, but if you put the Erev over there, then you're not going to get it, because that's really Rabbi Kiva in the Mishnah, who he says, even if you put in a city, you put your Erev, you don't get the whole city like Dalet Amos, then it's not difficult to Rabbi Lazar, because it's actually going like Rabbi Kiva, not like the Rabbanan. Additionally, we ended off the parak by saying that you don't have to be mimik your Erev more into the house, like that shul. Because you don't like Rabbi Kiva, we don't like Rabbi Kiva that holds that you measure exactly where you go. We measure from the whole enclosed area, whether it be a house or whether it be a city. And therefore, because we hold the halach we mekel by Erev. Hadran, Allah, Kitzad, Ma'abrin. This is Chaim Zandel. And B'dayel Mavinim, this is Chaim Zandel over here in the colony. So this is Chaim Zandel, very excited with his hat for Simchas Torah, or Simchas Be'Sheva. Such a Simchas Yom Tov, ain't Simchas Simchas HaTorah. On to the next parak, Parak Hadar, Parak Shishi, which we started in the sixth parak. We had Hadar. Someone's living with a non-Jew or a Kuti in the same court. Machlek is if it makes a forbidden on one Jew, or specifically if there's two Jews. And then we had two versions in Yom Gamliel regarding a Tzeduki, where a Tzeduki is Yisrael, so he can be Mvatal his Rishon. Unlike a Akum can't be Mvatal, you have to rent from him his right away. But you have to know if he could back it out. That was the two different versions. Could he be Machzer, even though the Bnei Movi were already Machzik, Tchila, there was a two versions right in Gamliel. The first version says, no, quickly put out so then he can't back out anymore. Or no, quickly do because it's going to be too late. Once he does, he's going to take back his right, and therefore that was the two different versions right in Gamliel. Take it to any time.